Hello everyone and welcome to Handmade Hero Show, where we code a complete game live on stream. We are actually just yesterday we kind of got everything working for packing HHA files from HHT files, so basically we can build descriptions of all the stuff that we want to produce in terms of packed art files, and then the game will just build them for us. Now, we were in the process of debugging that, and what we found was, for some reason, all of the things that we packed weren't coming out in the actual game. And so, I was like, well, maybe they're just not getting packed properly. But we dumped the HHA in two different ways. We actually made a little thing to extract bitmaps from it even. And what we saw was actually that it looks all correct, or roughly correct. And so we've got a harder debugging job today. We've got to find out what strange, subtle thing are we missing that's causing us not to get any results. Because unlike an obvious bug where you just get no images in the HHA or there's no tags in it or anything like that, we're not having that problem. We're getting actual, what look to be correct results in the HHA file, but then we're just not seeing the graphics on screen when we try to use those HHA files in place of the ones that we built using the previous process. And so today we've got to look in and see what's going on there, and I don't know. So just blind debugging to start us out. We're going to need to pick up some clues and then zero in on the answer. Now, just so everyone remembers what we did, we've got this idea that, there's a tags directory, and in here we've got these tags files that we made called HHT, or Handmade Hero Tag. And they're just text files that list everything that should go into our art packs. You can actually make multiple art packs in a single HHT too. I chose not to do that here just so we could test multiple HHTs, but you can actually make a single HHT that targets multiple HHAs and says build all these art files, and it will. And anyway, the point is it will build stuff into this data directory, and it will build things that based on the names you tell it. So we said we want a base game.hha, and it should have everything that this has in it. And gosh, they look really similarly sized, right? So it seems like it kind of did. And then we also have an intro cutscene one, and that puts all of sort of those cutscene graphics and the title screen and so on in there. Really kind of looks like it's being built fairly accurately. We made a thing in HHA edit, which is our little command line utility we made for inspecting these files, called extract, which will take a file and dump all the contents. We tried that with our intro cutscene, and lo and behold, everything looks pretty darn good. And so, we're kind of a little confused at this point as to what's going on. Because, again, really looks like the images at least got through fairly accurately. They're not all black or something. What they could be, and we could check right now, is it could be that the alpha is wrong. That's a little bit harder to check. I don't know how well bitmaps actually save alpha out, but we can generate separate alpha images if we need to. So let's take a look and see if maybe the alpha was screwed up, or at least just make sure that the alpha is doing what it should be doing to a certain extent. So you can see here, if I load this in, I'm not getting an alpha channel here. And so we don't really know what that means. Let me load this one as well. We know that this should have an alpha channel. And you can sort of see as I load it up into the GIMP that, I'm not getting that alpha channel. So the first thing I might suggest we look at, because we don't have a lot of other ideas, and just to, again, just to refresh your memory, if I do go back and I, use tab view here to open up the dump of the intro art file, because again, it could just be that the images are getting packed okay, but there's no metadata associated with those images, and so it's entirely incorrect, right? Well, if I actually go in and look at the intro cutscene text file, we looked at this yesterday as well, we can dump all of that stuff out and look at the individual assets. And when we look at them, they actually appear to be totally good, right? The basic category is 25, the shot index is 1, the layer index is 5. Now, it's possible that the basic category of 25 is somehow wrong. We didn't actually go verify what that should, in fact, be. So if I take a quick, if I take a quick look in Handmade Hero here at the tags file that lists all those tags, here it is, right? I could count them out: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh wait, no, that's the actual tag. I need the asset version here. Sorry. So we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So unfortunately for us, again, that all looks correct. Even the alignment point looks good, which I don't even think is being used in the cutscenes. I can't remember. Well, the default one probably is for the hotspot. So just looking at this, right, there's literally nothing I can see that's amiss. We don't know about this number, because this is the number that says where in the file the bitmap is. We don't technically know if that's correct. I mean, I suppose it could be wrong in two ways. But when we made the thing that extracted all of the files, they all came out exactly right. So that number sure does seem to be correct, because when we actually dump the images, that's where we're getting them from, and out they came. So it seems like, looking at this, I can't tell what might be wrong with it. Now, there's one thing I can do really quickly just to increase our confidence level, but then, like I said, I want to start debugging by looking at the alpha, because that's the only thing I can really think of to focus on first, and we'll just have to go from there. If I do an HHEdit dump of the intro art v2, this is the one that does work. So I just create a text file that says, you know, what's in that. If I tab view that, what I can do is look at the assets in there and just see, are those any more likely to be good, right? Like, do those have anything in them that I'm not seeing? Okay, so there's something we learned right now. The basic category for these was 19 before, and it's 25. That would have prevented us from finding them. So it could be that that's the only problem, that we've marked these wrong. So if the basic category was originally 19, that would mean that this was 24, 23, 22, 21, 20 opening cutscene. So there we go. So maybe, just maybe, the only thing we did wrong is we didn't label those things asset opening cutscene, and should have. Now, I don't really want to use this anymore. I would rather these just be called plates, because that's what they are. And I don't really want to have to label them as opening cutscene or something like that. So I think what I would prefer is if I actually just go into cutscene and I take a look. In fact, what I could do is just search for asset opening cutscene, and I just don't want that anywhere. So really, this part right here, I just want to be changed to plate. Right? And that's all I really want to see. So if I take a look back here, and I see that it's compiled, let me try running that, and let's see if that makes any difference. So I'm going to go here to Win32 Handmade, going to run the game, and then we're in debug mode here, it looks like. And then I'm going to switch to the opening cutscene, and I'm just going to see if we see anything this time. And again, we might not, but we'll find out in a second. Okay, so it looks like that was the only problem for our opening cutscene, right? You know, looking at that, it looks totally accurate. The only thing that looks different from the old one is its lower resolution. That's intentional. We have a thing now that tries to like size things down so they're more appropriate to 1920 by 1080 instead of being ultra high res. Again, that's just part of our packing process. The nice part about that is if we ever want to do like an HD 4K remaster of the game or something, we can always turn those numbers down so that it doesn't decompose or doesn't shrink them. And that's intentional, right? You want your source art to be fairly high res, and then you want your game pack to scale those things down as necessary, so that later on, if you want to do higher res versions for some purpose, you can, right? So this all looks fine now, and it looks like our asset packer is totally fine for the intro cutscene. Like, that's what it looks like to me anyway. I'm not seeing any errors here. This is all exactly like what it should be, as far as I can tell anyway, right? I don't see any issues there. Looking good. Yeah. So I mean, so I think, you know, I don't know, but I think we can call that a success. Like, that seems to have everything in it that we want to have in it. And furthermore, you know, in theory anyway, now we also have the fact that, you know, that title screen, if you remember, we've got in the cutscene thing, there's like a time when, well, I mean, I'll just show you, right? Right here, there's nothing, it's just a blank because we didn't have a title. And at the moment, we could even make a really simple thing that was that, right? And so we've got this cutscene ID thing, right? And the cutscene ID is just a thing that goes in here. And it says which one of these scenes we're doing. And when you look and you see update and render title screen, it looks like, well, actually, it looks like we just know that that's the case because we've set a game mode differently. So I guess we don't even need to add one of those. But anyway, when we do update and render title screen, you can see here that we do a begin render group and an end render group, and then a begin render group and an end render group, right? And we don't actually render anything into here, as far as I can tell, right? So we don't actually draw anything other than we clear to this background color, but we don't actually put anything onto the screen. So there you go. I'm not 100% sure why we begin and end the first render group like that. I think it's because we don't have any way, like, these are depth peeled, and these are maybe not. And so I think I think our render is a little borked in that it needs to have that pass, so we kind of worked around that. Eventually, it would be nice if we do a final pass in the renderer someday to just, like, clean everything. It'd be nice to not have to do that, because right now it's a little bit janky, but I believe that's all that was going on. But we don't really have to care about that at the moment, because really all we need to know is, look, in here, we just want to say, if we're not going to switch to the intro cutscene because our time has elapsed, let's render one of these plates, right? Let's render something for our title screen, because we have one now. And so if you look in here, you can see the way this works. We've got sort of the rendered layered scene call. It does a set camera transform here to just create, you know, a basic camera that can be used to draw the stuff. And we probably want to do something similar, although maybe not exactly this, for our own purposes here. So I'm kind of going to take a look and just copy that in, I think. And then, you know, when we look in here, we see the rough way we do our rendering. We can again replicate that. So I'm just going to go ahead and into this part of the code, I'm just going to put some really basic stuff to handle that, right? So I'm just going to say, like, all right, I don't want that. So for camera start and end, I don't really care about that part either, because we're not really moving the camera around much. So I can kind of just make the camera placed wherever I want it to be. So for the camera offset here, I'm just going to say, look, let's make the camera just be back a little bit in Z, and we'll just call it a day, right? So something like this, where we just move the camera back. And you can see in here, like, when we have where the camera should be, I believe that stuff is just all set. You can see in here, I believe this is the camera placement information, I think, is all this stuff is. So I think we should be able to just say, look, let's set the camera at this fixed location, and that'll be fine. We will I guess I don't know why we have to check for render group, because there's a render group always there, so that should be fine. And that's the time step update. So right here, we could just say, look, let's set the camera offset to what we know it's going to be, and the camera focal length will be that. Looks like we weren't setting a camera offset directly here. I don't know why, so we can just bake that in here. There's that. So it looks like that was probably, again, that cutscene stuff done way before our renderer had much stuff in it, so it's probably mostly that. We'll keep this focal length for now, not a lot of reason not to. But anyway, once we set that camera transform, we should now be able to just render like any bitmap we want into here. So we should be able to say, like, look, let's do a push bitmap on this and call it a day, right? All right, so I want to do that. I want to call a push bitmap. So I've got my render group here. And again, these render groups have to probably have an address pass because they're actually declared directly in this function. So anyway, we need to do a get bitmap info on this thing. We need to find which image we're going to do. The alignment stuff, I don't think we really care about here because I think that that should just work. Do we actually need to do that? Well, maybe we do. Yeah, it looks like we probably do. That's hard to say. So if we use that alignment point there, we'll just assume that we need to use that. We don't care about any of this offset P stuff. So I'm just going to render it at the origin because we're looking, or at least I tried to set the camera to just look at the origin. So for now, we're just going to leave it there. As far as the height concern, I have no idea what that should be. We'll play with that a little bit later. But anyway, all we really need to know now is what should we do in terms of this layer image. How do we find the image that we want, right? Because we need some way of grabbing the correct one. And so the way we're doing that back here, right, is we create one of these matching vectors. Again, that system, something we kind of wanted to improve on. So we'll have to, you know, this code will get simplified when we make a slightly better matching system, which we've wanted to do, but we just don't quite know exactly how. We're sort of hoping that now that we've got arbitrary tag files and stuff like that, it will become a little clearer how you want to access these things, but I don't actually know that that's true. So, you know, we'll find out as we go. So anyway, inside here, what we need to do is when we're getting that bitmap info, we just need a way to access it. And, you know, this is really all we need to do. So we can say, look, here's the shot index we want. Here's the layer index we want. Do it that way. Oops. And so inside here under the match vector, the shot index and the layer index can just be set to the two things that we know our title screen actually is. So inside the intro cutscene tags file, right, in here, we know it's shot index 12, layer index 1. So we can just say, look, grab that one for us. That's what we want. We can then say, well, we know it's an asset type plate, right? Oops, sorry. Asset plate. And that's all we should need. So the reason I say it's a little more complicated than it should be is you can kind of see that this should just be, like, we'd like this to just be easier to find stuff. It's just a little too much work. It's not bad. Like, you know, 10 lines of code for rendering the title screen out is fine, because this stuff is stuff you do anyway. You'd have to do this, you know, and that need to wrap around the rendering calls. I'm okay with those. But it's just a little, it's too verbose. You know, it's like I want to get this thing, and so we need to, like, we need to get a little better at how we do that those lookups. They're just not, they're not what they should be. And while I don't necessarily know exactly what will be better, I know we will be able to do something better once we really, you know, set our mind to it and focus on that as the next problem to solve. So that's coming. Let's see. What are we doing now? Just cleaning up bugs. Looks like that's the only one we've got at the moment. So that might be it, and then we should test and see. So if I, you know, am here and I split back, so that worked exactly the way we'd hoped. Too small, obviously. Let's see about making it bigger. I don't know how big it should be. Let me just change that to a 5 maybe. Oops. Crap. Of course, the 10 seconds elapsed. There we go. So maybe twice as big as that, I guess. I'm not sure. Maybe like that. And this probably needs to be pushed like up a little bit. Don't know how much either. And again, oh, you know what I'll do? You know what I'll do? Here's what I'll do. Let's just comment out the title screen time update, because then I can just run the game like, you know, like this, where I just say toggle full screen, and we'll get a little forecoder window here, and then I can just edit those values directly and not have to constantly recompile. I mean, relaunch the game. So if I set the time step to never update, then it shouldn't ever come off of the title screen, right? The title screen should just stay up always. And so then if I just kind of put my window, you know, down here, I should now be able to look at these values and get them correct. So if I like make it a little bit larger, and then maybe push it up a little higher. Let's see. Oop, that's too high. That seems reasonable, right? Now, we don't really know what the background would be here exactly, so, you know, at the moment anyway, we probably are just going to have to stick with that. And so I can at least, though, change it so that we're not doing this nonsense here. Like, I can make a black background for now, so it's like a little bit more appropriate. So this is kind of our bare title screen, and that's fine. All right, so success. Really happy with where we're at here. So now we can move on to the next step, because now we know also that our alpha is correct, because you saw the background shining through there, right? When I had changed it when it was orange. So we know that that's correct, and so now the question is, if I put this back, time step in. If I put this back in, we've got all of that working okay, and so the only thing that now we don't know if is that correct at all is the gameplay pack. So the stuff that has the things for the in-game rendering. Let's move on to getting that working. I'm going to go ahead and move local.hha into the v2 directory so it's out. And so now we only have base game and intro cutscene. I'm going to delete the intro cutscene text file because we don't really need it anymore. And we're going to take a look at the base game HHA and see if we can get that working. Now, I might as well go ahead and dump the base game HHA as well. Make sure that the stuff in there looks kosher. So if I do an HHA edit minus dump for the base game HHA, and I say, look, put it in dump / base game. Didn't mean dump. I meant extract. If we now look into there, what I should see is like, yeah, like all the pieces, like our cats and our characters, whose names I don't remember because I named them all really arbitrarily. I know this one's the baby, but the rest of their names. One of them was named Laird. I remember that. And I think her name might have been Sunny. I don't remember most of their names. We'll look them up. You know, we gave them names. They have names. I just don't remember what they are. All right, so what we now have is a verification that those things got packed in there correctly. And of course, we have the same problem we had before, which is I don't necessarily know if they've got the right tags on them. It turned out our intro did not have the right tags on it, and that was the problem. Oops, sorry. And so what I would like to do is just verify that that's the case. Oops. I would like to say, hey, like, did the tags make sense or not? I don't know. Got too many tab views open here. You know, do these things have tags that make sense? I don't have any idea. So we got a facing direction, dodge left, orphan, and hero. It's weird that dodge left is the what we called that tag. Would it just be dodge and then it'd be like -1 to 1? That's kind of strange. So we should probably change those tags, but you know, whatever. So the basic category here is 10. It's an orphan. It's the hero. I don't know what category 10 is, but if we look back at our file formats, it looks like category 10 is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is body, which seems right. So I feel like we are now at the point where, again, this should probably be working. Not sure what the problem would be based on looking at this, and you can see those alignment points there. The default one just got added by like it should. So I don't know. So let's progress. Okay. If I go into the player code, so basically the code that creates a new player, right? It's like add player or something like this. When we look at how it's rendered, you can see what sort of information it was given here in terms of what should be, like what the tag should be. So you can see that the tag orphan, tag spring, tag viva, tag glove, tag fingers, right? Those are the things that were like put on there to say who this was. So the body, I'm just going to do hero and hero. So when you add a player, it's always a hero at the moment, which probably won't be the case going forward because you'll probably be able to play as, you know, a couple different people or something. But for the moment, we're just going to say, like, if it's a player character, it's going to be the hero. I'm going to go ahead and compile that and see if we get anything at all when we actually run the game. So here I'm going to go run the game. And so honestly, it looks like it looks pretty good. And in fact, if I go ahead and change this to a release build, in fact, so that it's fast, I should be able to just play the game normally and see everything. So it looks pretty good, and what it looks like is the head of everybody is wrong. So if I had to guess, I would say that most of our import tagging and everything is working correctly, except for heads, and heads are broken, right? Because everything else seems to work here. And, you know, the alignment points all got reset, which is exactly what we'd expect because they're now just, they got recreated from the HHT file, which didn't have any set. So again, all this stuff looks nice and clean now. Whole game is, you know, explorable and playable and whatever. And so it just looks like heads are gone. So let's just say that that's probably what's going on and focus our debugging there. Is there something wrong with specifically the head import path? You know, and of course the fact that that dude's head is correct doesn't fill me with confidence because that kind of ruined my theory. Thanks, dude. You ruined my theory. We're going to have to add combat quickly so I can punch this dude for ruining my theory. All right. So, if I try to figure out what's going on there, what I would say is, you know, we've got these pieces, and what we did is we said, let's connect the base of neck to the default here with this headpiece thing. I'm going to go ahead and say that maybe what happens is that if you just don't have an alignment point set that you need set, then you are just permanently missing, right? So maybe what's happening is it's just because base of neck is wrong. That's the problem. So suppose I did this. That would say, let's say that the head is just connected directly to the world, like it's just moving around with the world position of this character, and there's the head. Okay, so I think we actually don't have any problems now. We just didn't add alignment points, and I had forgotten and or just never realized that in our system now that we've created the snap together thing, if you literally can't find the snap point, you just don't appear, right? So that's actually fine because I can solve that problem trivially. Right, we've got the editor for that. All we do is say, look, here's the hero body. We know we've got a alignment point thing. I need to add one for the base of neck. And then I need to just put it in the right place, right? So I just kind of adjust that to the right place. Similarly, while I'm at it, I might as well adjust the standing point to be in the right place too. And by the way, since the head is there now, which is this right here, I can also adjust its default alignment point to be in the right place too, right? So that's pretty easy to do, and so now we've got that created. Of course, we have to do it for all of our sprites, right? Like we have to actually align all of these things because we haven't done any of that yet. And I don't really want to do that yet, and the reason I don't want to do that yet is because we haven't finished the thing that lets us save these. Oops, I need to select a new one here, right? You can also see we're picking wrong on one of these things, and that's because we are not setting the dodge value on this guy, which we should. So if I go into the code for picking, you know, we've got these tags that we set here, oops, in file formats. We got these tags that we set, and one of them was for dodging. I don't know why it's called dodge left and dodge right. That's just dumb. I'm really surprised we did that. That's kind of just seems like it's just a really stupid thing that I did. So I don't know why that's happening. I'm going to go ahead and nerf one of these. I'm going to call this one dodge. And I'm going to say that this one, which is, you know, a different property index, I'm going to say that that one is actually gone. So that's goodbye. I also don't really know why these are, oops, capitalized or not capitalized. If you look at what all of these are here, like some of them are caps and some of them are not caps, and I don't really know why that's happening either. So that just seems a little bit weird. Like, are we capitalizing these or aren't we? And I don't actually know. So if I look, I want to know, do we do a strings are equal lowercase? And it looks like we don't. So it looks like we do a strings are equal. And so if I go into the base game tag file, which is here, and it looks like all of these things are lowercase, and then I come back into the intro cutscene, and like these are like the opposite thing of that. That just seems bad. Like all this stuff just seems wrong. I feel like all these things should have been capitalized, and so on, right? So I'm not sure why we did it that way, because it's not really part of the naming convention the way we do it. If I look and see in our strings are equal, we don't have a strings are equal lowercase, but we certainly could add one of those, right? That wouldn't be particularly difficult. And so I think what I'd like to do is just say, look, the default here is actually going to be that everything's capitalized so that it's the same as it is inside the game, right? And you can see that sort of happening here. So that, you know, tag underscore the thing is just the name, right? So they're basically unified in that way. Oops. And once we've got that set, What I'd like to do is say, well, I don't know that I want to go through here and have to update everything to be capitalized. So, and since we don't really care, I think I'm going to say that in here where we do like a line point from name and so on, I'm going to say that these can just be case insensitive. So that way we just don't have to care. Hopefully that makes some sense. Okay? So let's figure that out. If I go back to strings are equal, where we have these various ways of calling these, when I do the strings are equal in here, what you can see is that it's a string versus a string. So it's always two strings, it's always two actual bound strings with sizes. And so what I want to do there is just say this one here where we do strings are equal, I'm going to go ahead and make one of those that just works with lowercase letters. So I'm going to copy this and say we've also got a strings are equal lowercase, and all that's going to do is say like convert to lowercase. I don't know if we've got anything like that. It's really easy to write. So, okay, to lowercase. And that way we can do case-sensitive comparisons. And I know that this is the one that I actually want to do for it because we're doing string to string. So I'm just going to copy that one in and just call it like this. And so now we've got a case-insensitive version. And hopefully that's... Oops, I meant lowercase. So hopefully that'll work now. And what we need to do to finish this off is I got rid of that dodge tag, right? And I can actually do this now and rebuild everything if I want to, which is kind of awesome. So I can actually, these are hard-coded integers now, so they're baked into data files. But they're only baked into the shipping data files. They're only baked into the HHTs. Everything else is matched by name, which means if I just rebuild my HHTs, which we can do trivially now, I should be fine. And all of those indices will update, right? So if I go ahead and do a delete base game.hha, excuse me, and rebuild it, it should actually have those things set properly. Now, because dodge left and dodge right were actually used in here, I have to fix that. But what I'll do is I'll just say, look, dodge left is -1, dodge right is 1, and now we're done, right? Everyone's happy. So now dodge is in there, and that will prefer a dodge of 0 if I then set it. So let's first double check that I didn't break anything else. We'll rebuild. Again, this should just running the game should automatically rebuild at the beginning here that base game file, so you can see it getting built right here. So as we build that, once that's done, of course you can't really see it getting built because it more shows up right here. Right there it is, and now it's done. And so now everything should be fine. And what you can see again is, right, the thing that I was complaining about is that dodge is getting picked. The reason it's getting picked is because we haven't told the game to prefer one or the other. It just says, hey, I don't care which one you use. So what I want to do is I want to make something in here which says I want to prefer the 0 version of this thing specifically, right? So in the asset match vector in here, since we don't really have the concept of dodging quite yet, what we're basically going to say is, look, we want to match the dodge as well, right? That should be matched as much as it can be. And, maybe it's not as important as facing direction, but if you've got 2 to pick from, you still want to pick, right? And so now, at least I hope, we should pick non-dodge, although the fact that I'm not actually seeing us pick non-dodge is not reassuring. That should have done it, right? Because tag dodge is 0.5. So it should be preferring to match the 0 to the 0, I think. Why is that not working? We may have to step in there and see. So if I make it extremely heavily weighted to match dodge, you know, this could be because the way we do the matches is broken. I'm not entirely sure. I don't have a lot of ideas there. Because we're specifically saying, look, you gotta match dodge very strongly, and we're setting dodge equal to 0, right? So I'm not sure why it would ever prefer one of those. Now, of course, like I said, the matching stuff is kind of broken right now. So it could be that it's just kind of busted, and I just, you know, don't really know the internals of the routine, and so I'm making some kind of assumption about what would happen when I did this. Not sure. But if I go look, so let's suppose I come in here to the matching routine, and well, I guess I can just jump right to it. Get best match. So if we look at the best match bitmap here, or I get best match asset is really what we want. What you can do is you can look and see how it's working, and again, my assumption seems to hold here, right? It's looking at each asset. It says, take a look at what the two values are. So in this case, they would be 0 and 1.0 or 0 and negative 1.0 on those dodges. It takes a look at what the difference is between the two values. The tag range, I don't really know. I don't know how the tag range thing really works. The tag range is just so we can match facing directions better. For periodic things, that's what that's doing. But anyway, whichever the minimum distance is, we look at the weighted delta between that, and it gets higher as it gets closer to 1.0, right? So it seems like it should say prefer if the dodge were 0. And since you have you should have two pieces that are exactly the same, and the only difference is the dodge value is not 0 in one of them, you should have been preferring the one where it was 0. So something is weird about this, but I have no idea what it is. So I'm just thinking in my head. So there's three things that could be wrong. One is our import process is incorrectly setting the tags, so that things that are supposed to be just the regular standstill are getting the dodge tag, and the things that aren't, or something. Right? The next problem is there is something wrong with the matching, so that the thing I think is happening in the computation isn't, even though I just looked at it. I'm just wrong in the way I'm following it through. And the third one is that somehow we're getting an actual preference for dodging because it's actually getting set somewhere accidentally, like the entity does have a dodge tag getting set on it, which I can't imagine because I don't think we've literally never done that. So that seems really unlikely. Weight match vector comes first, weight vector second. That's what we expect. Weight vector here is multiplied. the tag range, I should look and see how are we setting those. So it looks like, yeah, the tag, that looks fine. That all looks fine to me. So the tag range is just whatever for everything else, but then for facing direction, it's a wrapped circular value. I got nothing. I have nothing. I have no idea why that's not picking correctly. So I guess we still do have, I thought we were almost debug free, meaning we'd gotten to the end of it. But we're not quite. We still just have an issue with the cutscene. I mean the base game, which is that the dodge seems to be getting preferred. Now, that's not necessarily that's not a bug that necessarily has anything to do with our new code, because we were never trying the hero out before. So we don't know, like, it could have just been a bug that's been in there forever. So it's not necessarily a bug in our new code. It's just, but it is a bug before we can call it done. So I want to get to the bottom of it. Other thing I'd like to do, I'd like to delete these files because I don't think they have anything to do with anything anymore. So I'm just going to move these out, and we can just go with test fonts v2 for now as the only residual file, and I think we're okay at that point. Meaning, if I run the game now, I think our only problem, as far as I know, is that we don't have that dodge pick working correctly. So yeah. So if I just take a look at what's going on, I think it's just the dodge that's wrong. Everything else is fine. We can now rebuild everything from the HHT files, which is awesome, except for our fonts. The fonts is something we will have to do as a separate thing, and we'll get to that, right? We'll definitely get to that. Okay, so everything's good. I'm happy with all of that. I also think I know how I want to do the fonts. We'll address that later. But anyway, so right now I just need to figure out what's going wrong with that matching, and then I think we can call it a day, because I think we're just good at that point. And I can move on to like doing the rewrite stuff, which I guess we don't have time for today because of this. I would have liked to have started on it today, but you know, this is probably going to take me the rest of the day to, well, the rest of the 2-hour block to nail down. So, all right, so I guess what I want to do is take a look at that match and find out why it's not producing the result that I think it should, right? So there's a couple of things I can do there. First of all, if I go into if I go into the HHT file, right? I can verify, you know, body hero, right? Always gets an orphan tag, always gets a hero tag. Those tags appear to be working properly. If I go into the import side of things and I look at what's going on, you can see that these are the X indices marching along: idle, dodge, dodge, move, hit, attack, attack. And as far as I know, we're always just setting tag idle. So we should just be getting that. Now, maybe we're not. You know, that's the other thing. Maybe we just aren't giving it anything to work with. I guess I hadn't thought of that. So inside the entity, are we setting tag idle anywhere? Is anyone setting that? Let me see. When we do add player, do we set tag idle? Okay, we don't. So that actually, now I think about it, could have just been the problem. The problem is, yeah, we could say try to match dodge exactly, but if it doesn't have a dodge tag on it at all, I'm not sure what that would do. So, like, again, because our matching is kind of screwed up, that could be the problem. So if I do a match vector tag idle, and I say I want to match that, does that just work? Because, again, I don't need to belabor this point because the matching is not what I want it to be anyway, so we're going to spend more time improving that as we go. Okay, so that fixes it. So it was we were just not giving it a positive thing to look for, like, hey, you need to match idle. It's telling it not to match. Telling it not to match dodge doesn't help because these didn't have dodge tags on them is probably the problem we had. Like the rest of the things didn't, right? Okay, so now we're down to just the alignment point issue, which is exactly where we wanted to be because that brings up our next piece of code we had to write, which is something that rewrites the HHT while including edits that have occurred inside the game as necessary, right? So that's the thing that we want to get to next, something that reproduces the HHT properly. And so what you'll see here, right, is if I can actually, I think, do this already. If I go in here and I say, look, I need you to take this thing. Let's use the forward-facing one so we know. If I go in here and say, okay, I want to do the alignment points on this thing. And so I'm going to set the default alignment point. Oops. Let's skip that here. So I'm going to set the default alignment point like so. And I want to set the base of neck alignment point like so. And then, you know, I'm going to grab the head and I'll set that alignment point as well, right? And so now the hero is all set up, right? It's all good. Let me just make sure this alignment point is what I think it should be. It should be like that. And this should be... How come I can't see this point? So that's the red point. Oh, right, because I'm on the wrong one. This is the one I actually wanted to edit. There we go. Should be like right there. And then this should be like right there. Let's say. All right, so if we're in that, and I should really improve this interface a little bit. There's a couple things we could do to make this a lot nicer very quickly as well. If I hit the save button, right, we have written the modifications back to the HHA. And so now if I close the game and reopen the game, it should actually still be there. So as you can see, the one we made is, you know, it was saved. And I want to go do that for everybody so that now all of our art will just work, right? But the problem is, if I now go and rebuild the base game HHA, just to illustrate the problem here, it's had that alignment point written back into it. But if I delete it, right, and now I run the game and it triggers the rebuild, it will wipe it out, right? Because it doesn't know I just deleted the only place that stored that piece of information, right? So it's going through rebuilding the base game HHA. It's importing all of those art assets that were it for the gameplay, resizing them, placing them in there, right? And they're all correct except for the alignment points are gone, right? So that's the thing we really want to fix, and that's where the rewrite comes in. So in order to do that rewrite, we just need to make some way of when you're saying save the game, you need to read the HHTs and copy them over to new HHTs, right? So basically, we need to update one of our ideas about what's going on here and sort of change the way that it's actually working. So if I go over to the in-game editor, it sort of has some stuff in here that's now no longer correct. It has a thing called modified. You can see here in save all changes, right? Save all changes is not going to be, this isn't a thing anymore, right? So that find clean edit list, like that whole thing, that's just not, and get asset for edit, like we don't really need any of this anymore because we can't use it. It's not helpful. And so, you know, the clean edit pointer, it just doesn't matter. So we can probably simplify the editor by getting rid of that, actually. If I look around to see where that's actually getting used. So it looks like that's actually just used for undo redo. Anyway. I guess? So it looks like that's just used for tracking undo and redo. Which I'm not even sure we really needed to do that way, but oh well. So if I take a look at these and I just say, look, what's actually going on here? In save all changes, we really just don't need any of this anymore. So it does look like we need, you know, this. But write all HHA modifications is not really a thing that we're ever going to do anymore. Because in order to do it, we really need to do the full walk of our text tag, of all of our text tags, because only things we have those text tags for can we really properly save data for, right? So really what we've got here is write modifications to all HHAs, and write all HHA modifications. Apparently we have both of these, right? All HHA modifications. Where is that? Hey, look. We already had that function. Whoops. So I'm going to bring that over here. There it is. It's like almost exactly the same. It's like the only thing we did is we cleared the temp arena more aggressively there, which is probably better, right? So write all HHA modifications. Again, not really the way we wanted that to be. Because this should not ever be callable separately. So what's going to happen here is actually these things have to happen together. You have to do this process and then this process. Otherwise, it's simply not a safe edit, because you will write changes to one place and not the other, which is simply not allowed, because then you just end up in a situation where those changes only exist in the runtime data files, and that's bad, because that means if you ever want to rebuild the files, that data will be eliminated, which we never want. All right. Yeah, so just looking at these two as well, I think I might just do something more like this, where we actually do a temporary memory thing. And here I just say begin temporary memory on the temp arena. And I do end temporary memory here. So we don't really need to create a new arena every time. We can just cycle through it this way when we do our modification writes, like so. And so import changed assets now is going to be a different name. It's just going to be like, you know, synchronize asset file changes. And that's the only thing we've got, right? So that's just what you do. There's a thing that you call, it synchronizes everything, and it's the only operation you get. You don't get to do anything else. Happy birthday, right? So here's that one. And maybe we do this on startup, generally speaking. Right? And I don't know, but you know, that's just what we're going to say that we do. And then in here where we've got the editor has to do that synchronization as well. So when you actually say I want to save changes, that's what will happen. And there's really not two of these. It's just this. Right? So you just get one button. The button is synchronize. That's the only thing that it can do. And it has to call synchronize asset file changes, like so. Now, we could make it more granular. if we wanted to. So if we wanted to have an import and save or just another one, we could actually do a little bit of that. The reason that might be interesting is we might want to have a way to just do an import that does a strict revert as well. I just don't know how we want to do that. So if you look at synchronized asset file changes, there's ones that just do the read, and there's ones that do the read and the write. You know what I mean? So we can do a strict import that only brings things in and never writes things out. And I just don't know whether we want to do that or not. And you know what? Here's the thing. We had it in there. We can have it in there still. The difference would just be there's import and there's import and save. And that's what you get, right? You don't get anything else. So import doesn't rewrite the file. Import and save does. So we can have those two things, right? And that's fine. So the way that would work is, again, inside save all changes, which I believe these are the two places that's actually called from. Inside save all changes, right, it would just need to pass through what was happening here with the synchronize asset file changes thing. However, I believe that's not quite right, because if you're going to do save all changes, then the only thing you can do is that. So really the way this would work is this would call synchronize asset file changes directly if you were just doing an import. It would not call save all changes at all. So that's what that looks like, and that's what this looks like, I think. Right? So I think that's how that would play out. Which then means that inside import, we need a bool here that's like save changes or something that writes back to the HHTs, like so on. Or rewrite HHTs would be a thing. I'm going to call it save changes HHTs, though, only because we probably want to implement it in such a way that if an HHT has not changed at all, meaning there's no difference between the one that we created and the one that is going to go out to the world, then we just don't need to bother, right? So that seems like a fair plan to me. Pretty straightforward, right? Okay. So we've got synchronized asset file changes now. We have it all structured so that things are going to go the way we want. And really, I think, so what we need to do here is say, hey, in here we've got this HHT rewrite where we're creating a new, a new version of the HHTs that we're reading, and we want to make sure that those things get mirrored properly. How do we do that? And so what I think we want to do here is say, all right, in the HHT context, let's forget this HHT rewrite nonsense. Doesn't really make much sense to have that as a Boolean. Let's instead make that a stream that says, look, if we're rewriting the HHT, here's a stream that we're going to dump the new data to. And if we're not, then we don't have that stream. So looking at the stream stuff that we've got, right, we've already got this idea that we can set up a stream that's got memory in and output. We can do outfs to it. This is set up exactly for what we want to do. So I feel like we just want to do, all right, create an on-demand memory stream for each HHT. We'll dump the stuff in there if we're going to dump it, and we won't if we won't. And so this, I think, is what we really want. This HHT out stream, right? And we just say, all right, put that in the temp arena. We know that's all going to get cleared, and that's all we really want it to do anyway. We'll dump it in there. We don't really care about the errors at the moment, but when we do actually care about the errors, we can also hook that up to something, right? So that's kind of nice. And then we're done, right? I think that's all we really need to do. So at the end here, after we've produced our on-demand stream, we can use the stream calls that we've got to produce the necessary output, right? So what we can do there is say, all right, give me the total size of the stream. Like so, right? And really, you know, when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking too, like, the HHT that gets loaded maybe should get loaded outside here, so this can do that check. I'm not sure how exactly my structure. We'll see in a second. But when I get the total size, I'm thinking there's probably also a way to output one of these to memory, right? Or there should be a way that just runs through it and stamps it out. So I want to think here that I guess we don't have yet, which is just like, okay, we've gotten the total size of the thing. I want to see if I need to rewrite the HHT and produce like a new one. And so what I'm going to do is yeah, there's more than one way I could do this as well. Since this is under source code control, yeah, just I'm not sure how I want to do this. There's a number of different ways you can do this. They're all subtly different. I'll do the first part because it's the same in all of them. So what I need to do here is I need to create a block of memory. Right? I need to just say, look, I'm going to write this somewhere, and I can just do a, give me some memory. Here's how big the thing is, the block that I need to write. So why don't you just create the whole thing for me, right? So this is the HHT output, HHT contents, I guess you could say. We know it's this big. And I suppose I could just, do we have like a push string size, push buffer or something? What is push buffer result? No, that's not what I want. Not push, I don't want that. Push size, space size. So I guess we don't have one. So unfortunately, we don't have one that just pushes on the room that you would use for a string, which is all I really wanted, right? So I guess I gotta make one, which is fine with me. So yeah, do we have struct buffer? We do. So buffers and strings are the same here, right? So I'm just gonna call this in here. I'm gonna say, look, there's gonna be one of these things. It's going to be called like push space, maybe, or like push buffer, maybe. I think we already have a call called push buffer, right? Which is what I'm worried about. It's on a render group. So I think we're okay. I'm just going to call it push buffer and I'm going to go from there. So if we call push buffer, you're going to pass a size. And it's going to return you a buffer, which is the same as a string. So either one works, right? And in here, we're just going to say, look, the size of this thing is that. And the push size call will give us back what we want for this. So we're done, right? So that way in here, I can say, all right, I'm going to create a buffer for this thing. So here's the HHT contents. Right? And I'm going to do push buffer on the temp arena with that size that I said that I needed. Right? Here's the get total size on whatever that stream was. So the HHT out stream. So that's how much we need to like put the whole thing into a contiguous piece of memory. Once I've got that, I just want to output the thing to a buffer. So I just want to do like copy stream to buffer. And I want to say, take the entire stream, which is in lots of little tiny chunks that are all like strung together, right? And take that stream and put it into here. So now I've just got one contiguous chunk. And then finally, what I want to do is just save that to a file, right? I just want to open a file and write the whole thing out into it. But first, I want to compare it. I don't know if we've got a memcomp. I think we do. We do. God, gotta love that search thing I added to 4Coder for functions and stuff. Saves so much time. Anyway, so if I go in here and say, look, now that I've got two versions of this thing, I can see if they're the same, right? So now what I should be able to do is diff the HHT contents with the contents from the that I originally read in, right? And if they're equal, I don't need to rewrite. If they're not equal, then I do. Okay? So that should be a pretty straightforward way to make this work. You know what I'm saying? Now, I'm going to do something a little controversial here, but I just think, like I said, that was when I paused for a second. I'm like, there's a bunch of ways to do this. I think which way I want to do it, which is I do want this to be in the platform layer. And what I want is I want basically an atomic file replace operation. Why do I want that? Well, file operations can fail. We know that's true. So I want a way of, at the platform level, saying, write this entire file out first. Make sure it works. And if it doesn't work, then I don't want you to replace the file. You know what I'm saying? So I would like to do something here that's like platform replace. Like this, where I can say, I want to replace the contents of this file, but don't do it unless it works. Right? Don't do it unless it works. So don't just start writing to the file, and then if you fail, be like, oh, whoops. Write all the contents out to the drive first, then atomically swap that in place of the old file using like a rename, so that you never end up in a situation where you just don't actually have any of the file left. I don't really need to do that. But I just thought it'd be like kind of an extra level of safety there, where it's like, look, the HHT file is something we're editing, and we don't want to lose all our edits for a day because some weird like write bug happened or something. So maybe we just have this atomic replace file contents call, and at the platform layer, that will like do the right thing. It'll like write it to a temp file, swap the temp file in place of the old file or something like this, right? So again, not really sure we need to do that, but I don't know. So what we want to do now is back out, I think, a little bit of what we were doing here in the parse HHT. I'm going to pull this code right here. I'm going to pull that out a little bit because, well, I mean, I guess the other thing I could do is I could do it inside there. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just push that one level down. Maybe that is where I'll do it. I just can't decide. I'm not sure how I want to do it. But, let's say we do it this way. Because that's just how it happens to be set up right now. It would look like this, right? And so what I'm going to do is say, okay, let's use that context temp arena, right? We'll create an HHT out in that case. We're going to pass this down. And so we know whether we're saving changes or not. And so when we come through here, we're just going to say, look, if we're saving changes to HHTs, then create the HHT out stream. Otherwise, it will remain uninitialized and unused. We do the load here, so we've got the file buffer. It's going to go through and tokenize it and have a little party. When we get to the end, we'll look again and say, are we supposed to be saving changes? If we are, we will reproduce the entire HHT as a single block. We'll diff the file buffer with the HHT contents to see whether it needs to get replaced. And if it does, we will replace it. Now, we've got the file info here, so we can just pass that along, and then I think we're good. So now we have the ability to do everything we wanted to do. We just need to fill in a few pieces because at the moment, we're still not actually doing any of the stream copy stuff that we said we were going to do, right? So now we need copy up to and including. we need that call to work. And at the moment, we don't have a way of making that call work. So that's the next step that we have to go in here and do. So what I'm not sure about is all the stuff that we were doing in here, right, where we do parse top level block, and we do like copy all up to and including. So when we do that stuff and we come through here and then we do like the alignment points, right, we need some way of skipping over the alignment point stuff because that sort of gets rewritten because that's the part that we edit, you know, in a way. So we have to kind of figure out what should be happening there. There's a couple different ways we could do that, but we need to figure out what's going on there. So when we do copy all up to and including there, we need like a way to say in here, this is not right. This actually has to be that. So that semicolon, we need to copy up to and include the semicolon, but what we need to do is make sure we skip anything that we actually didn't want to save, if that makes sense. And in fact, if we wanted to, I guess we could not copy all up to and including, So again, all I'm really trying to figure out is in the alignment there, it's like, well, I want to make sure I copy everything, but for like the alignment stuff, I need to make sure that I copy as much as goes on in there. Like this may have to get rewritten if this, and like what if that alignment point got like deleted is the thing I'm thinking. Then there wouldn't be a semicolon. So we would have to advance to the semicolon, which is harder to do, I think. So this is a little squinky. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Yeah, I guess. So again, out here too, like all this stuff should be fine, I think. The include directive we've never used, and we would have to do some special handling to make sure that it recopied the HHTs properly, I think. Although I guess not, because it looks like that would just work. So in here, we just need to make sure that we save the HHT context and then restore it. So I think all we have to do there is say, look, the HHT context stuff, in here, we're going to have a stream for HHT out, and we're going to have a token position. So if you look inside the tokenizer at where these things are being recorded, you can see that it's got a an input string, so it would have a char pointer. So it would have a like HHT copy point or something. I think that's all we would really need to save. So if we just get rid of this, that would just tell us, look, these two things are you know, all we're using to handle that, where, you know, where we're sort of moving that along. So all we really should have to do here is with the HHT out and the HHT copy point, those just needs to get saved and restored. Now, the problem that I would see is, I don't know what happens if you include the same HHT multiple times, because the rewrites would like conflict with each other. So, but I'm just going to say, look, that's your problem. If you use this feature, you better know what you're doing. So all I really need to do here is say, look, this stuff's just getting saved and restored, my dude. So that's what's happening. And so done. And then we'll just clear them and go. So this would just allow us to sort of bracket an HHT inclusion by saying, look, we're going to have to do a new stream for this because it's a different HHT. So, you know, act accordingly. Everything else should just work, I think. And then at the end, we just need a copy all input up to and including to finish things off, right? Now, the problem is if we encountered a parse error, we probably don't want to do anything. So we probably want to do something like this. Meaning, you know, if something in here triggered an error, don't save the changes back to HHTs because we just don't know what we would actually be creating in that case, but it would probably be erroneous and we'd just be corrupting the file. So if the file did not parse completely correctly, then don't write the changes back that we encountered, right? So I think that's all we really need to do there. And similarly, this doesn't really need to happen if we're not, yeah, this only occurs in this one case as well. So I think that's what we want to do, and we would just say that last token. I mean, I could even do that here, I guess, because we have like whatever token we actually saw last. So basically, we would say at the very end, make sure you copy that token, and then I think we're good. I think. So the only thing that I'm not sure about is I feel like maybe right here we would have to do it as well. So when we come down into here and we're ready to basically tokenize a separate thing, we might have to. No, I guess we wouldn't have to because we will just restore our state and continue on. So it's a little squinky. I've never really done code that does this rewrite thing before, so you know I'm still kind of learning as I go in terms of what I like. In this case, but I think that should basically do it. So at that point, we're really just down to this function, and what we want to do is we want to copy everything that we see exactly as it says. So in here, I'm just going to do a check. Does the HHT out exist? Right, I just want to see. Excuse me. Pretty stuffy today. If the HHT out exists, I'm going to copy into it. So I'm just going to basically like loop over everything that I've got. And just plunk it in. If I'm not mistaken, then inside the stream, you can just push junk onto it, right? So this append chunk is all I really need. To do what I want to do, right? So you say, look, put this chunk on there and call it a day. Since I know that all of this memory stays around, I don't even have to copy it, right? So it's very efficient. All I'm doing is saying, look, append this chunk to the stream. Where whatever the token pointer is, it's going to be, apologies for not remembering what the token struct looked like, text. There you go. So token text, it's basically just going to be whatever the token text data pointer is, plus the count pointer. That's where we end. And in fact, I can do this as an intermediate computation because I'm going to want to do a check. So I'm going to take the end and say that's where we're at. I'm going to say that the start is just context HHT copy point. And so I want to copy between these two, but I'd like to check to make sure, before I do, that the start is less than the end, right? Assuming that it actually is, then I'm going to do the work. And when I do the work, I'm going to say the end minus the start is the size, and the start is the pointer. And you can see this is really kind of elegant, the way this ends up working. We've loaded a file into memory. We're effectively just making a chunk list that says grab these blocks and copy them in, but later. So I'm not even doing it yet. I'm just building up that list as I parse through. And then I've got some insertions that I'm going to do where I'm going to add blocks that never existed in there, right? To represent my new data. And that's the entirety of the process, right? And we don't ever have to do any diffing of it ourselves because we know that the diff that we do at the end will completely take care of that, right? So it's pretty nice. Seems pretty good. And I feel like it's actually a lot better than the way we're rewriting our HHAs right now. I almost feel like we should probably do something similar to that for the HHAs in the future, where instead of having to track, like, do these tag arrays match or whatever, we just take the block that's the entire back side of the HHA that we would have written, and we say, does it differ from the one that's in there right now? And if it doesn't, we don't rewrite it. That's like way better because it's a lot more foolproof, and off we go. So I think that's the thing that we really want to do here, and I should probably make that change. I'm going to actually write it in here because this is where that should go. All right. Because, yeah, like we just, if any change occurred at all, then we want to rewrite the whole thing. We don't rewrite only portions of the header. So as far as I can think, I feel like all we really have to do is make sure nobody reorganizes things in the asset list if you haven't edited anything, which if you haven't edited anything, then no one should have done anything to them. So I feel like it should just work in that case. So I don't know, like we can play with that a little bit later on as we fine tune the system. For now, I don't care. That's sort of a different problem for a different day. All right. So if I now go ahead and run this thing, of course, we've got a few things to fill out here. This is a false. This does not rewrite changes, obviously. So all I really want to do here is get to the point where we are... Oops, that's a char star. I didn't mean for that to be a char star. I just have a few things I've still got to implement that we didn't put in here yet. So let me go ahead and just get those going. All right. Token is passed directly, so it's not an arrow. What else we got? HHT out is spelled wrong. Well, capitalized wrong. Yeah, okay, so this is the alignment point part. So we aren't really doing this yet, but this is what you would be checking. So I can leave that in there. When you do a parse HHT, you gotta pass now whether you're saving changes, so that's fine. This needs to take the context, right? And it, I don't remember if it takes anything else. Nope. So it's just the context and the token. And then down here, we've got a few things to deal with. The temp arena is actually here, right? And then we've got copy stream to buffer we have not implemented. And memory is equal between two buffers. We actually have implemented sort of, but we just need the cracking call for it. So if I go over to memory is equal, like all we need to do is just add the call that basically says, here's how you unpack those into something that this can use. So if we do like pass two buffers, then the result is just the same exact call, memory is equal file buffer count file buffer data HHT contents data, right? And the only thing we have to do is check first before we do that they're the same. So we do file buffer count equals the same size. So we do file buffer count equals HHT contents count. That says, look, don't do the next part if these buffers aren't the same size. If they are the same size, check to see whether their contents are the same, and then we're done. So that should all be fine. Let's see, HHT out must have an arrow, and you're right, it does. Not sure what it's complaining about here. That's just a regular pointer already. So is that. Copy stream to buffer isn't implemented yet, nor is that. So I think we're now just down to the things we haven't implemented. Inside stream, copy stream to buffer should be pretty straightforward, right? The only thing we really need to do here is copy. I believe we have a like write stream or something like this. Stream dump stream to CRT. That's basically the same thing. Write asset stream, basically the same thing. So you know this is all we're doing. So it's really very, very simple. So you can see here. Look, we just have a data offset. All we need to do is start at 0, stream through all the chunks. So we basically say the source, in this case, we loop over every chunk that's in the source. We want to copy the contents of that chunk. So we want to say, look, copy this thing into the correct portion of the buffer. So we just say it's the destination plus however far we've gone. And then we just advance. So we're just looping through each chunk, doing the copy, just like, right? And like I said, we've done this in a fairly elegant way because in some sense we have avoided ever having to do intermediate copies. We're just doing the final copy into one big buffer. We never did copy into smaller buffers because these chunks just point directly into the source data. So it's just reassembling the source buffer, right? So what we want to do here also is assert that we wouldn't overflow. So when we come in here, we want to say, you know, make sure the total size of the source is less than or equal to the size of the buffer, right? And so we would just say, you know, don't let, you know, if we're about to like romp over this thing, let the programmer know they screwed it up, right? And I'm not going to have it clamp. You know, we could have had it clamp here where I say, look, just copy as much as you can. I'm not going to do that because I don't have a use case for that yet, so I don't want to introduce that. I just want to make it a hard error. Like if you ever call this thing and you didn't give it enough memory, it's just a hard error you screwed up, right? because there's no case I can think of where that's going to be a situation. I don't know, is this count? Yeah, sorry, it's count. All right. Cannot convert to... Okay. That's fine. Fine. Everyone's happy now, hopefully. And then when we come through here, we can just, well, actually, I guess there's really nothing that you have to do. It's just done. I would like, however, when we get out of here, I would like to reset these. So, like, when we get to here, I would like to set this to 0. Just to make sure, like, basically that we will crash immediately if someone was trying to write to this outside of the valid region, which is only inside this function. So I really don't want to leave those as pointers hanging around into memory, because that memory will actually still be valid and people could be writing into it and I would never know. So I could have like a subtle bug there that it wouldn't crash, it wouldn't do anything, it would just kind of like silently fail, which is not a great, like, you really don't want to have silent failures. That's not a very good position to be in. So I want to make sure that that does not happen to the extent that I can. So let's go ahead and make that work. All right, so where else are we at? Cannot convert from U8 to char. That's totally fine. That would also have been fixed. Push buffer is not supposed to take one argument. Why is it saying that? Let's take a look at what push buffer does. Is there like a macro for push buffer? Why is that thing? Is there an error before it? No. So it just says no overloaded function takes one argument. Atomic replace file contents not a member. So why does it think there's only one argument to push buffer when there's two arguments to push buffer? Am I missing something? Oh, wait. So there was another error there. Why did it look like there weren't two? I was like, I assumed that the error was exactly what I just fixed or something like it, but then we didn't have it. So the only thing we're missing is atomic replace file contents. So yeah, I just need to go in there to the Win32 side of things and add that in. So let's take a look at how we might do that. So at the moment we've got our, where is it? Here's our write data to file. And so we more or less want this. But instead of write data to file, what we've got here is like platform atomic replace file contents. And that's going to take one of these platform file info structs. And it's going to take a buffer. Well, let's unpack it for now. And that's going to be called platform atomic replace file contents. Right? And so here we get HHT contents. I'm just going to say, give it the count, give it the data, and then that's all done. The platform layer will have to have it, so, right, that's going to go there. And then the Win32 side of things, in Win32 Handmade, when we actually fill this stuff out, like you can see here, we're going to have one. So in Win32, write data to file, which is here, I'm going to just copy that. And now we've got the setup for it, but we haven't actually done anything. That's actually fine. I'm just going to have a not implemented thrown in here, and then we're going to call it a day. So looking at this, it says too few arguments for call. Is that actually true? Did I accidentally leave an extra argument in there when I copied it? Oops. There's the problem right there. Let's fix that up. Looks good. So now I think we're pretty good to go. I think everything should be fine. So if I run the game now, I have no idea why there was a breakpoint there. If I run the game now, in theory, you know, if I come out here and we've got the import and save, these are not lit as the way that they should be. So we should probably fix those, but we'll do that later. When I actually click on the import and save, you know, we should have gotten here, and we did, which is pretty cool. But of course, you know, we're at a place where we didn't actually write anything. We just produced the thing we would have written to the file, but then we called a platform layer function. It doesn't actually exist. If I try to look at what's going on there, I could probably do that in debug mode a little easier than in release mode. But really, all I want to see here is what is the, you know, what is the thing we actually produced when we called copy stream to buffer. So I think I can actually do this, right, and say in here. Okay, did I not set the breakpoint? Can't find it. So probably what happened is it got optimized out in a way that it couldn't find. Yeah, so it probably just eliminated this, unfortunately. I mean, not eliminated it, but just inlined it in a way that it can't set the breakpoint anymore, which makes it less fun. Fine. I will run it in debug mode, as much of a pain in the butt as that is. That's just where we're at. All right, so off we go. I'll run it, and now I will ask it to resave the file. And now, hopefully, oh wait, I should have set the breakpoint first. Try that one more time. So now I should hopefully get a breakpoint there, and I do. So when we pop out of that routine, I should now be able to look at the HHT contents and see what's in them and if they're at all correct, because, you know, maybe they're completely borked. So gonna go ahead and say probably not a good sign. Does not look at all like what I wanted. By any stretch of the imagination, and I have no idea why that would look like it does, or why the count would be 3, right? So we did something really dumb, but I have no idea what it was. Let's take a... Oh. I do actually know exactly what it was. So when we initialize the HHT copy point, we can't initialize it to 0. That's just stupid, and I don't know why I thought we could. What you actually need to do is initialize it to the beginning of your stream, right? So basically, after you load the file and initialize the tokenizer, that's when you can actually look at the HHT copy point. It's the tokenizer's first token, right? So whatever would have come in as peak token raw as the first thing that you would have looked at, that's actually the only thing that we can use to start with. And if we didn't, we are invalid, right? So we need to actually grab that as our HHT copy point. Otherwise, we totally don't work because I don't know how we didn't just crash. Does anyone have any idea how we didn't just crash? I mean, how did that not crash? We must have more bugs. Because if you look at what would have happened here, this would have been 0, which would have always been less than end. We would have appended a chunk that was totally bogus, and then from then on we would have done some stuff. But like, how did that not... I'm at a loss there. I mean, that would have been 0. How did we not end up with a totally bogus copy? I guess we'll find out next weekend. That's going to take some device. Like, that should not have happened the way it happened at all. That's just totally broken. So the fact that that didn't crash is super weird, and I'm obviously doing something that I didn't think I was doing, because there's no way that should have worked, right? That's just really, really strange. Gosh. Yeah, I just don't know. That's really weird. How did that work? I'm gonna have to go look into it. Yeah, so it's producing exactly the same thing even without that. So it's just really strange, right? It's like it never called this or something. Is that what happened? No, it's calling this just fine. Oh, but HHT out is not initialized. All right, so let's try it now. No, it's calling it. And it's appending the chunks. Okay. I'm going to look at this. Sorry, I know I'm supposed to be done with the stream at the moment, but I'm really kind of weirded out right now. I'm mildly freaked. So HHT out now has what on it? Right, that makes sense. Next. Next. That looks exactly like it should. I must have just a bug in the copier. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that the bug is here. Because let's see what the total size of HHT contents is. So get total size is 3. How is that possible? It really did get completely overwritten. So how did that happen? We never hit this case, right? I mean, we've never called include. So the only thing that, like, how could that have happened? When did that happen? That the total size could have had such a dramatic change to it. Ah. That's the only problem right there. So interesting. Very, very interesting. So anyway, inside parse level of block, you can see what's happening here. We're just like cleaning up our memory that we were using for the stream, which we could just use a different one for the stream, but I don't know that there's really any reason to do that because we can just do it in here. So I think that's fine. At least I can't think of any reason not to. I do want to know what we do with errors. I guess those just end up on the file, which is also fine. But that's the problem right there, right? We could also just not free any of this temp memory if we wanted to, because we clean it all up at the end. But that looks like the entirety of the problem there, right? That's funny, like a memory bug prevented us from having a memory bug, which is pretty odd. All right, so if I go in here and just look at the copy stream to buffer, hopefully now we actually get a real size, and it looks like we sort of do, at least a little bit. So if I then look at the contents of this thing, hopefully they look somewhat like the file, and it does seem to look somewhat like the file, right? In fact, so much like the file that it matched. Perfect. So it didn't think it needed to replace it. Let's look at the base game. Same thing. So we're actually totally good. Perfect. We nailed it. So I'll go to a quick Q&A now, and then next week what we'll do is we'll just go add the thing in that does the rewrite of alignment points, and I think we're good to go. There are no questions. Complete silence. Wow, that's impressively few questions. Do you ever write unit tests for testing low-level functions instead of running through the game? When you are going to be a little closer to shipping things, like when you're like kind of done, if this makes sense, like if you're just like, I'm really sure that everything is architected the way I want, and I'm gonna like say that this is reusable final code that is what I want, does what I want, and it does it how I want it, then you can start to pull apart a few things that you think might benefit from unit testing and do the unit testing. I do that. But, you know, I guess what I would say is, while that is a nice thing to do for code that's going to get libraryized, and so you can kind of pick it apart and do that too, unit testing you can't really rely on. I've said this many times. If you rely on unit testing as part of your development process, you probably just never be able to write a game. Games don't really... The hard bugs that you will get in games are not unit testable. The easy bugs are. And so that's usually the problem. So like, while it's nice to do some unit testing on things that when you have some low-level library stuff, like our memory allocator, when we're totally done with it and say this is exactly how it is, we could test it out, make sure it doesn't have any weird leak cases or edge cases and things like that. As just an extra layer of nice sort of certainty over the top. Your debugging skills have to be way better than the kind that just say, hey, I'm going to use unit tests to find my bugs. Games are way too complicated, and unit tests just don't work. They won't find the majority of the bugs in the game, and more importantly, they won't find the majority of the hard bugs in the game. And so you really need to be better at debugging than unit testing if you're going to make a game engine. You just do. So what I would say is it's not that unit tests aren't useful sometimes. They are. It's more just that they're insufficient. They're not good enough for a game engine. Now that you've done a C++ game engine series, you plan to do a C game engine series. This basically is a C game engine series. There's almost no C++ in it at all. If you wanted to compile it entirely in C, there's almost nothing you'd have to change. It's kind of just a mechanical week's worth of work sort of cleaning things, but it is a C game engine. Any thoughts or hopes for C2X scheduled for 2022? Yes, my hope is that I will no longer be programming in C++ by 2022. Those are my thoughts and hopes. Edvin Holm, when you transform a mesh, do you do that on the GPU? If so, do you load it back if you, for example, want to raycast against it? So the answer is yes and no. The answer as to where you transform a mesh is pretty much always on the GPU because it's a massively parallelizable operation, and GPUs are way better at parallel operations than CPUs are currently. They're just much wider, and they have better thread management for those kinds of things. So you definitely always transfer them around the GPU. And when you say, do you load it back if you, for example, want to raycast against it, the answer is that you usually try not to raycast against the mesh. You try to raycast against something else that approximates the mesh, and you try to do that with things that themselves don't deform terribly much, if that makes sense. So typically you have hitboxes, right? And those hitboxes don't necessarily mean boxes. Sometimes they're like actual, they have shape. They're usually convex solids. And you raycast against the convex solids by just using the bone transforms and the convex solids on the CPU side. That's typically what happens. If you really, really, really need 100% pixel accurate raycasting for something, I don't really know what people would do these days. It's a good question. You wouldn't read it back, because by the time you got it back, the results would be meaningless, because you're like 3 frames late or so. So I don't really know what you would do. What I would probably do, because I did do 100% mesh accurate hit detection in Granny on the Rad Game Tools character animation library. I did do that. What I would probably do is not that different today as to what I did then, which is you would hit test those collision boxes, like I just said, which is a simplified model, and you would make sure that they were conservative. So you make sure that you use bounding boxes or volumes that enclose the entirety of the mesh, no matter how it was deformed. which you can do because deformation is a known process that you can make sure that you can be conservative about. And then based on which one you would hit, you would just on the CPU side transform just those triangles that are near that collision volume and then raycast against those. That's what I did on Granny, and I'd probably just do it again that way today. How do you toggle between debug and release builds? Modify the build.batch each time. Yeah, I just changed the OD to an O2. How do you conceptualize and tackle large projects and prevent from getting overwhelmed and lost in the weeds of minute details? I tend to suffer from analysis paralysis. Well, I mean, you see what I do on Handmade Hero. It's really all I do. I just try to improve areas as I go. There's no magic formula for it. Most people can't do large projects at all. And it kind of requires a team to do. If you're doing one by yourself, yeah, it's difficult. You really just have to be willing to write code and experiment and let things come together. Try not to do too much analysis. Like, try not to sit around doing something where you're not programming. Is, I guess, the only thing I could really offer. Let's say in AAA Studio bought quite a bit into object-oriented programming. Any steps in to show that that's not the answer, easiest way to go forward? They have a code base that works, but changing everything is a pain. It's hard to make them see that this is one of the big problems. Any advice? It's for a friend. Don't work there. Go somewhere else. I don't know. You can't argue with programmers. They're very pig-headed, so I don't try. They're mostly religious. They aren't motivated by data most of the time. So, you can ask someone to please demonstrate to you why they selected this way of coding, and they have like no answer. Not just a bad answer, but literally none. Like, I'm just like, what did you actually do to determine that this was a good programming paradigm? And it's like, they've never done that. That's like 90% of programmers have literally never done any experimentation to determine whether things that they do actually have any practical benefits. So how do you convince someone like that? You can't, right? It's fundamentally a broken, it's a fundamentally broken mental model. So, hey, if you happen to have someone at the studio who is results-oriented and is willing to think about things, then that may be a person to talk about, right? To talk to. And be like, hey, so here's all the practices that we're currently like enforcing in this code base. Has anyone actually checked to see if any of these are actually working? And what did they do to do that, right? If someone's actually receptive to that line of questioning, awesome. But most people aren't. They like start talking about all kinds of nonsense. Like, well, it's modern C++. It's like, that's not science. Like, that is not an experiment where you have measured whether or not this thing is actually improving the code base, right? And so you just can't have a discussion. If people are thinking that way, there's no discussion to be had. It's game over. And unfortunately, like, that's just, so I just don't try. It's worthless. I don't know. There's nothing you can do. How do you it's similar to saying, like, how do you convince a Jewish person to believe in Jesus or a Christian to not, right? It's like they've crossed some threshold where they just believe things, and I don't know. Because if you don't come from an engineering perspective when you're talking about what you're working on, then I just don't know. And if you do come from an engineering perspective, you're not using object-oriented programming. Pretty much. So I don't know. I got nothing. It's a lost cause. Sorry. Watch your talk about lines of code problem. Have you ever seen anything from Ian Pumarta? No. I don't think I've heard of that name. Do Twitch subs count towards source code access? No, Twitch subs are just something that happened because we're a partner now, so you can subscribe, but it's just a Twitch thing. That's all it is. It's just it's just Twitch's thing. So I think it turns off ads, gives you access to emoticons and access to archives. That's it. So it's there for people who don't want ads and stuff, right? But that's really all it does. It has nothing to do with source code access or anything. That's our product. That's the thing that we have, right? And so yeah, like it's just for ad-free viewing. It's the same as like YouTube Red, right? Like if you want to watch the videos on YouTube, the Handmade Hero videos on YouTube, if you're a YouTube Red subscriber, there's no ads, right? So, but that's it. That's all it is. To use any graphics libraries? No. What are your thoughts on the use of C++ Lambda functions? Seems like one of the better additions to C++ spec and doesn't break procedural style. I mean, I don't know. C++ features are kind of just an exercise in, is this a thing that you... is this a feature you can make some productive use out of that doesn't really ruin things for you? And I kind of stopped bothering to evaluate C++ things because almost every time the answer was no. But there probably are some. So like maybe C++ Lambda functions, more or less, can be useful without ruining things for you. I don't know. My guess is if I did really try to make serious use of them, I would probably just get annoyed and stop. The problem that they're trying to solve is one that should be solved. So I would say that is good, meaning the C++ Lambda is trying to do something that should be supported by the language. But my guess is if I actually went and looked at it, I would have a laundry list of complaints about the way they chose to implement it, because every time I ever try to do something in C++, that is what happens. I'm like, well, you tried to solve problem X. The correct solution to problem X has all of these elements to it. You got one of those and ruined 12 things. That's what happens every time I look at a C++ feature. It's always like a giant train wreck. And so eventually I just stopped. I'm like, it's just not worth my time. Once in a while I might find one, right? But just the number of times that it just wastes my time and I end up going, this is garbage, is just too high. So it's just a trade-off now. Like reading a C++ spec is just a waste of time now. You're wasting time. You could have written the code the other way already and been done by the time you figure out whether this feature is even useful, and most of the time it turns out it's not. All right. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Let's close this down. Close this down. All right, thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you as always. If you want to follow along with the series at home, you always can. You can pre-order the game at handmadehero.org. Comes with all the source code so you can play around with it, compile it yourself, and pretty soon even rebuild all the art assets every time yourself, which is what we've been working on here to make sure that they don't have to come from us. So that means you can kind of mess around with changing how the art packs are built, or add your own art assets or remove them, do that kind of thing, which should be pretty nice, right? So looking forward to that. Also wanted to mention our comic came out last Monday. For those of you who don't know, it's called Meow the Infinite. You can always get to all of our projects by just clicking on any one of our websites. You can always click on the little site icon. But Meow the Infinite, meowtheinfinite.com is up now. You can read the first issue online. It's pretty cool. If you like cats in space, which I hope everyone does, you should check it out. You can go directly there, or again, just use the little linker, which links you to everywhere on our site. My blog, Handmade Hero, Meow the Infinite, the main page, Anna's illustration blog, and of course 1935. So anyway, give that a check if you're looking for something to read. Until next week, which I think now that everything is kind of working, I guess we're just into feature addition territory. So next week, I think what I'd like to do is get the alignment point rewriting done so that we can mark up all of our art assets. And then I'd like to go ahead and maybe add sound import in there, because we've already got the code for it. So it would just be putting it into the tag, like so that we could have tags that were like, this is a sound, right? So we would like to do the sound importing, and maybe let's get the font importing in there. And then we've got the full, like you can just build full game assets into HHTs. And that's kind of then in a way, that will then become kind of a universal build sort of thing. So you could just build HHAs and use them wherever, right? Like they are just like now easy packageable metadata markup kinds of files that just work. So that's kind of cool. And the only thing that we would have to do to really make it fully generic is to define the tags somewhere outside the game, so that you can the parser could know like what those were, right? That's the only thing we don't really have at the moment, is a way to build an HHA file without some knowledge of what the tags actually are, right? So that one's a little bit trickier, but we could actually do that too, which would be pretty neat. So that's it. See you back here next weekend for that. Until then, have fun programming, and I will see everyone on the internet. Take it easy, everybody.